Why do so many atheists choose to keep their deconversions hidden? And what are the impacts of that decision? Why exactly is it so dark in the atheist closet? Hi, I'm Shannon Q. When we're contemplating why deconverted atheists may hide their loss of faith, we have a tendency to look too specifically at external influences. While they play a significant role, there's an important component that needs more focus: our internal perceptions and the importance that they play in our self-identity. In order to be as comprehensive as possible, I think first we should acknowledge and go through some of the research regarding overall perceptions of atheists. In recent studies, it has been noted that more than 40% of Americans have a clearly negative perception of atheists. Atheists are seen as immoral, combative, criminal, dishonest with themselves and others, and the least likely to share a vision of society that the populace would find preferable. While that in and of itself is a troubling phenomena, there's more to unpack here, and it's really important. In one study regarding the perceptions of people who subscribe to varying belief systems, participants were asked to identify which people of varying groups were most likely to engage in immoral or destructive behaviors. These groups consisted of varying religions and atheists. While all others were likely to assign the atheists a high likelihood of engaging in the most abhorrent behavior, what is particularly troubling and what is going to become relevant here is this: the self-professed atheists also had a high probability of attributing the immoral behaviors to other atheists. In follow-ups, self-report determined that the value structure of those atheists wasn't even marginally different from those of the religious affiliations when identifying those behaviors as immoral and abhorrent. However, the atheists were more likely to individuate, allowing themselves to detach most strongly from the group that they self-identified as a part of, and were more likely to identify as sharing values with the group of previous religious preference. This is where the picture becomes increasingly complex and multifaceted. It's become clear external perceptions of what an atheist is are not representative, rational, or reflective of the reality for most atheists. Because of that, it's already difficult to profess outward atheism without immediate and almost certain stigmatization. The potential and perceived negative impacts of the impending stigmatization may alone be enough for some to be compelled to pretend to hold to the vestiges of their previous faith externally while holding conflicting views internally. But there's more. In order to explain the next portion in more detail, we need to take a look at a few underlying components of group and social identity theories. We don't develop our self-identities in a vacuum. A well-established, researched, and inherent part of how we ultimately define ourselves can be attributed to the groups that we see ourselves as a member of. And defining ourselves as members of that group isn't simply about commonalities that we see within our intergroup dynamics. We cohesively establish these frameworks via contrasting against other groups. We aren't simply a member of this group because we have X and so do they. We also innately note and exaggerate differentiations between our groups and others who are different from us. If that external group holds principles competing with the foundations of those in our own group, our tendency to vilify and form complex social biases to undermine their relevance is strong. Our identity is interwoven with our beliefs and our social identity, creating a clear distinction that differentiates us from the competing outgroup, which embeds us with a strengthened and more positive social identity, even if that self-gratification is ultimately a misinformed and biased illusion. Now, considering this, let's take a moment to entertain a common scenario. One any atheists who have deconverted had to address, and one many of us have had to address alone. We've established that a large and intrinsic part of our self-identity is tied incontrovertibly to our membership in our groups. We also have an inherent tendency towards creating negative perceptions of those whose values we see as incongruent with that group. Now imagine that group is your religion. Just imagine, and you don't believe it anymore. What does that mean? What it means is that you're now involuntarily a member of the group you perceive as having negative attribution. Perhaps you even contributed in stigmatizing them. Becoming a member of this mistrusted outgroup can have a dramatic impact on your self-perception. This is where we visit our study again. Why do you think those atheists thought that the other atheists were likely to be the most immoral? Because atheists are immoral? No, of course not. The respondents are atheists themselves. It's because those affiliations, the ones that help build our identities by differentiating us from them, are so strong that breaking them is almost insurmountable, even if you yourself are one of them now. So, why do we hide? Why do we pretend? Why do we stay quiet about what we believe? Aside from the very real possibilities that you will be stigmatized, the fact that within many faiths you could be expelled or shunned, even leaving the lack of focused study regarding the impact of deconversion, there's something important that's happening internally. You are now them. You had no choice. You can no longer identify with your previous in-group on the principles that cohere the group and form the group's identity. And that identity is an invaluable and inextricable component of you. And that can be terrifying. When you answer just one question differently than everyone else that you identify with, it generally doesn't matter. But if that question is, do you believe in God? A myriad of cascading assumptions arise based on the value assigned to that question regarding cohesion and identity and morality. And it's so immense that entire communities are formed based solely on an affirmative answer to that same question. When you can no longer say to yourself that you're honestly a theist, you become them. And there are no atheist churches to convert to reestablish a group identity. So unless you know where to turn, you do so alone. It's no great surprise that so many of us choose to hide who we are and languish, pretending that we're somebody else in the dark. But please don't. The implications of holding the external trappings of a belief that you no longer internally hold are staggering. That identity I mentioned, the one that is now in flux, can never be fully achieved. Suppressing and pretending to be something you aren't isn't a healthy or sustainable life. Stress affiliated with maintaining a lie internally can raise cortisol levels, putting stress on your organs. The internal introspection regarding the legitimacy of any relationships you hold on a false premise can cause you to withdraw and dissocialize. And the fear of being uncovered can cause personality changes and depressive states, and that's just to name a few. But there are ways that things can change. When people ask why we form and promote communities, it's because it's important and there is support. Again, I will have resources in the video description. Find a community. We're here and we're more abundant than you realize. And we know some of what you're feeling and we want to help. You don't have to hide. Live your life as you. The rest of us can't wait to meet you, and I cannot wait for you to meet yourself. Thank you all again so much for watching. We're on Patreon now, so if you'd like to support the channel, there's a link in the description. All of the research studies that I used are in the description as well, along with the resources. If you need them, please go to them. Please let me know also in the comments down below if you identify with any of this. I can't wait to hear from you. And until next time, don't forget, help elevate the discourse.